Hello friends, welcome to Simzuu. We have already started with the new series that is on labor codes. Labor codes, as you understand, have already been passed. What we are awaiting are the rules. The Honorable Central Minister has recently proclaimed that the rules should be somewhere in the month of April. And as you understand, that labor is a concurrent subject. So there is a central legislation as well as a state legislation. In state of Maharashtra, to be more particular, I believe that the rule should be somewhere maybe in the month of June. That's what is the news. I really don't know. But then, okay, let us start with the thing. We have already seen one thing in the last videos, that is why the labor codes were enacted. And in continuation with that, I will just put it this way, that the economic liberalization in 1991 transformed the economy. Today you see jobs you get jobs today, but this was not the picture in the year, say 1970, 1980s. So in those decades, jobs were not prevalent. And this had so many social effects, including the Indian cinema also. If you see, the movies in those years were roti, kapda or makan. So you don't have a roti, you don't have kapda, you don't have makan. So the youth is very angry. This saw the birth of an angry young man, and that is Amitabh Bachchan. And likewise, if you see the transition, because you cannot see everything in isolation, it has a social effect also. And what we see is the social effects after 1991 is that because of the economic liberalization, everything changed. Now the key challenges even then which remained are the rigid retrenchment and closure norms, which are even prevalent today and which are to be cured by the labor codes. Difficulties in workforce restructuring and burdensome approvals and compliance processes. So this was sensed by the government, and that is to be done away with, which we are going to see as to what it does. And ultimately we see that the workers also, on the other hand, experienced increased informalization, unorganized labor, gharelu kamgar. Have you ever thought that the domestic servants who work in your houses, the maids who work in your houses, do they have a union? At least, are they organized? Is there any minimum wages for them? Nothing of that sort. Contractual employment was without social security. It's just a travesty of justice, I would say, that in the same India, you have another India. इसी भारत में दो भारत बसते हैं. One is on the permanent role, that these are the workers on the permanent role, and these are the workers on the contractor's role. Wages are different, service conditions are different. Law says that you treat everybody equally, but what about the implementation? So these were some of the challenges and the obstacles which we had. And there was a limited protection in services, technology, and in the emerging sector. What about the protection to gig workers? What about protection to platform workers? What about Uber and Ola drivers? All of these things prevailed for a good length of time, which was sought to be cured, or which is cured rather by the labor codes. Of course, friends, we are today going to see some 10 glaring changes which have been brought about by the Industrial Relations Code. Now, friends, I would be taking up two codes, that is the Industrial Relations Codes and one more, and then the remainder of the two codes will be taken by Shubhankar Malegaonkar, who is also one of the directors in Malegaonkar and Associates. Okay, so friends, let us move further. Well, friends, if you see properly that the economy changed, but the laws remained the same. And if at all India is to be a Vikasit Bharat by 2047, and India is really to usher into a $7 trillion economy, then certain changes in labor laws were a must, which are, in my opinion, to an extent, or rather to a great extent, taken care of by the labor codes. Now you see what has happened is the earlier we recognize the systematic inefficiencies, successive policy reviews and the expert committees all have commented upon as to how the labor code should be, and there should be some common factors, that is simplification of the legal framework. The laws were very complicated, definitions are different, same definition of employer in this act is different and that act is different, and then you have to see the definition in the context of that act. There should be a uniform definition, which was absent. Then there were removal of inconsistencies. There were some inconsistencies prevailing amongst so many laws. Then technology driven compliance. Now if you see India in 1970, 1980 and today, there is a sea change in the technology. So are we going to use the technology? And if the answer is yes, so you should have a technology driven compliance. And there should be a formalization of the workforce also. So much of the Indian workforce is informal. For example, as I just now mentioned it, Gharelu Kamgar, migrant workers, I mean, they come and go like nomads. So this has to be dealt with by somebody because they ultimately remain to be Indian citizens. And finally is the balanced flexibility for enterprises. When a businessman starts a business, he goes to the bank, takes a huge loan, repays the loan, and then he should not be caught in the rigmarole and in all the intricacies and procedural obstacles which the law provides. In fact, what should the law be doing? Law should make it simple for all businessmen so that they do business, earn money, bring money, foreign exchange increases, India becomes prosperous. That should be the ultimate goal. The goal in labor industrial relations is not that I am for the management and you are for the union and then we have an antagonistic view about each other and we share a Tom and Jerry relationship. No, that is not what is expected. Here, you neither belong to the union, you neither belong to the management, you belong to India. And it's in the fitness of things that India becomes prosperous, India becomes Vikasit Bharat. So today friends, I am going to see 10 major changes which are in the industrial relations code. Let me be very clear that 2 of the codes would be taken by Shubhankar Malegaonkar, 2 of the codes would be taken up by me, and the journey, possibly it could also be that this episode is part 1, then the next episode is part 2, but I would just mention it to you that those of you all who have not seen our earlier videos, kindly see them. It will change your perspective about labor industrial law itself. And we have started the labor code series. So if you are a good listener and a good viewer about all labor codes, in no time you will be a master as to what is really happening. Okay, so we start with it. So friends, let us see as to what are the 10 major changes the industrial relations code has brought about. Now you see, first is the higher threshold for standing orders. As you understand, in different states, of course, the number could be different, but in state of Maharashtra, standing orders are applicable after 50 workmen. Now, this figure has been stretched up to 300. So from 0 to 300, there would be no standing orders. Standing orders would be applicable only after the figure of 300. Moreover, also Chapter 5B of the Industrial Disputes Act, which is applicable after 100 workmen. Remember friends, I am saying workmen, not employees, because even a managing director is an employee, but a managing director is not a workman. I am saying 100 workmen, Chapter 5B of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 applies. And what is this Industrial Relations Code? Industrial Relations Code is an amalgamation of 3 laws. Industrial Disputes Act 1947, Trade Unions Act 1926 and the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946, of which we are seeing the Industrial Relations Code and 10 major provisions. So first is the threshold increase as to what we see as to how the threshold has increased. Now this is going to have far-reaching ramifications, because what is the law governing between 0 to 300? Model standing orders or standing orders would be applicable after 300. So in between, what would be there, which we would be discussing in some other videos, but today we are just on the 10 major changes. The second change, friends, is prior permission is needed of the government when there are more than 100 employees as far as retrenchment and closure is concerned. There are so many units they want to close down, and you can just imagine that in a family, let us presume there are 4 people. So the worker, his spouse, 2 children, and if the industry is allowed to close down, then it was thought that 400 people will be on the roads. But ultimately what happened? Ultimately those industries which were closed, they were closed, and the people and the workers, you see, they were facing the music. So somewhere there should be ease of doing business also. What about those medium level or small scale businessmen who have appointed or who have recruited 120 workmen, but he is not allowed to close? He cannot pay the bills, he cannot pay the electricity bill, he cannot pay the vendors, he cannot pay the suppliers. Ultimately the industry is resulted in their own death. So can't we have a situation when we have different forms of employment? And then this is introduced by the labor codes, and at the same time, as I said, retrenchment and closure. Today you need not take the permission of the appropriate government, because the threshold limit now is more than 300. So from 0 to 300 you need not do anything. After 300, of course, you will have to take the permission. Then friends, what we see is the third category is the third change is very important, that is fixed term employment has been statutorily recognized. If you see, in state of Maharashtra, we have the model standing orders, Bombay Rules 1959, in which there is no category, only fixed term employment. So there is no fixed term employment, permanent, casual, all of those categories are there, but there is no fixed term employment. And fixed term employment for the first time is introduced by the labor codes. So as an employer, what I should be doing? I should be having a proper manpower planning. That, say in my industry this year, how much is the work which I want? That I want, say something like 200 workmen I require more, but I require them only for 2 years. So I will recruit 200 workmen for 2 years, and after 2 years all of them go home, for which of course I will be paying them gratuity, which we will be discussing independently. As of now, what I say is fixed term employment is introduced, which is one of the major changes which has been brought about. So friends, it's time for me to say a goodbye. Keep following us on all the labor codes, because we have started the new series, and this is part 1, and in part 2 you can see the remainder. Don't forget to see all the videos. Yes friends.